Hey guys, welcome to the first live coding session that I'm doing on this channel. The idea behind this coding session is that if I run into bugs, if I have to research, I will do that on the camera, giving you a very real picture of how, as a software developer, I build project from start to end and what kind of tools and what kind of techniques that I use, and maybe that will help you out. So the project that we are building today is going to be a URL shortener. The idea is very simple. So for example, let's uh, define some features. So that's basically I do if I'm starting a project, I always define a feature markdown file where I basically, roughly talk about or, note down whatever I'm building and what will be the features there. So basically the idea is that user will come and give and user will give us a URL. It can be a very big URL, it can be a short URL, whatever, and then we will convert or shorten that URL. So we will shorten that URL and give it back to the user, and whenever user will visit the shortener, we will redirect them to the original URL, right? Why build a shorten URL project? Because first and foremost, it is very widely used in almost a lot of company which uses um, links in their applications. So even if you go to YouTube or any other platform which allow you to share things or share links with other people, most probably they'll be using a like link shortener service, right? So, and even in my previous company we were using something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it is a very common use case or a very common problem that mostly everybody have to solve. The other thing is that this URL shortener project will take us from front end to back end, even including a DB. So yeah, I think we will have like a very all around problem to solve. So we have to visit like a lot of different tech stacks. So that would be great, I guess. All right, so this is going to be the original problem. And what is going to be the tech stack? So I am, just for the sake of simplicity and easy prototype, I'm going to be using Next.js. Even in production, even if I'm building this in production, I most probably will use Next.js. If it is a very small service, if it's a very big service, maybe I'll be using, a dedicated Node.js service and all that. But I think Next.js is totally fine right now. So we'll be using Next.js for our front end and the back end. Other than this, I'm going to be using Postgres as the DB, right? And then I'm also going to be using Prisma as the, the ORM basically, right? So it will make it easy for me to, query the Postgres DB. I don't have to write like SQL and all that, right? So, and I think that's pretty much what we're going to be using. So let's first and foremost set up a Next.js project here. So I'm just going to be going to a terminal, yarn create next app dot. I am adding a dot because I want to create the project in this, um, in this directory, the root directory. So it is basically saying that I already have like a feature.md. So I'm just going to delete this from here and going to start again. All right, it's asking TypeScript. Yes, I always use TypeScript because it just make your work easier and easier to like spot errors even before you go to like production or even if you run your application. So that's great. ESLint, I'm not going to say no. Yes, I'm going to be using Tailwind CSS. Would you like? No, I don't want. So yes, I'm going to use app router. Yeah, sure. Use Turbo Pack. I don't want to customize the alias. So it's basically installing the project, and until it's doing that, I'm very curious about you guys. I really want to know you guys more. Um, so if it will be great if you can comment out, what kind of experience you have, what tech stack you use, and maybe we can spark a conversation there. And also I'll be able to know you guys more and maybe create more videos which you want, right? So comment down below what kind of experience you have, how many years you have been working as a software engineer, software developer, or if you are, if you want to start, in software development, and what tech stack you are interested in. So yeah. Okay, so it's done. Let's learn this. Let's run this project. So yarn dev. All right. Okay, it's running. So the browser that I'm using is Dia browser. It is like one of those AI browsers, and it is kind of like successor to the Arc browser. But yeah, I mean, this is like their beta version. That's what I'm using. So let's go to localhost 3 server, and you can see the application running here, right? Now, let's, even before we build the UI, because I think UI is like the easiest thing that we have to do. Let's first define our database and everything. So let's go here and create a new folder. Let's call it URL. It's going to be the API, right? And create a new file here, and let's say route.ts. So in Next.js, if you want to define an API, you just have to name the file route.ts, and it will be basically available for you to it will be available as a URL, as an endpoint. So let's define the our API. So cursor is enabled right now, which is good. So let's import next response. So I'm going to be using cursor because normally I would use it. And even like in most cases, because this is a kind of small project, I mostly will be asking cursor to do it for me. But yeah, I mean, in this case, I'm not going to do that, but I will be using its inline completion, all that. So export async. So first and foremost, I'm going to define a post function, which will be basically creating our URL and everything, all that, right? Now, before we do that, let's go ahead and create a folder, and let's define our schema, how our database is going to look and everything, right? So I'm just gonna say schema. I also want to install Prisma, so I'm just gonna ask cursor how to install Prisma and everything. So how to install and use Prisma in this project. And until it is doing that, I'm just gonna plug my laptop into a charger. So here's the charger. Plug it in. That's okay. Great. So it gave me the, basically like how it should look and everything. So yeah, so first and foremost, we have to add the Prisma and the Prisma client so we can basically um, use Prisma. So let's do that first. So I'm just gonna add another terminal here, yarn add Prisma, which is the base package, and also like Prisma client. So, and it is add Prisma slash client. So add Prisma slash client, and let's install it. So it's getting installed, and then to add the initialize the Prisma, I can just say npx Prisma in it, right? So let's do that. Npx Prisma init. So it's fetching the Prisma command. I already installed it. I don't know why it's fetching it again, but yeah, let's let it do that. And most probably, according to it, it will create like a schema for Prisma folder and a schema.prisma in it. So it's done, and you can see Prisma and schema.prisma, right? So I'm going to delete this schema folder here. Now let's go inside here. So you can see like the generator client, that's okay. But you can see data source DB, provider Postgres, and the env as database URL. So whatever database URL that we will define here in the env is going to be used, right? And it also created the env file here, you can see, right? That's okay. So now let's uh, go ahead and define our schema, right? So now let's define the model. So it's going to be model URL. This is essentially our database schema. So our database schema will look something like our database schema will look something like this. So ID, and then there going to be a URL, which is like the original URL. Then we are going to have a slug. Slug is basically a ID, right? So for example, if it is something like this, localhost 3000 slash URL. We can say URL, or we can, let's say and we can have like, some ID, right? So this is going to be the slug, and according to that, we will basically redirect to the, the original URL. So we have slug, and then we'll have like created at and updated it, right? So we can just use that, and you can see I'm using the date time type here, and also at updated. This will like automatically like update the updated at, and also like created at, which I'm using as the now, right? And the ID will be string. So string, right? And by default, we have to tell it that it's going to be the main ID, and by default, it will use the CUID identifier, which is like, you know, it there is a very low probability that this ID will exist in the database and everything. Then we'll have the URL as a string and slug as a string as well, right? So this is how our database schema is going to be looking like. So ID, URL, slug, created, updated. That is great. Now, okay. So now I think we have to update the migration and everything. But before that, we have to like define our Postgres URL. So how should our Postgres URL should look like if I'm running it in localhost? So I am already running a Postgres database in my local. So I'm just going to use that. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. Username, I think I just have Postgres as the user and the password. Postgres locals 543. Database name will be um, URL shortener. Let's see, URL shortener. All right. Okay. Looks good. And I think I have to run some Prisma command. So um, how to generate Prisma types, etc. Also the client, etc. So what Prisma basically do is that it will like generate types for your database that you can use that inside your like front end or backend project and all. So what I have to do is after updating the so npx Prisma generate, let's do that. Okay, so it generated you can see like it's generated this folder, and from that folder we are basically reading the client, right? Okay, I think that's great. What else? After schema changes, every time you do this database migration, create and update database. Because we just created our schema, let's also create the database, right? So let's example for your first migration. I can even just do this. I don't even have to name it. So npx is migrate dev, and it basically enter a name for your new migration in it. So it basically your database is now in sync with your schema. So basically it is saying that um, our database is created and our schema is like, created there. So I didn't have to write like an SQL or anything. Prisma just took care of that for me. Also, we have something called Prisma Studio. I think we call it like this, Prisma Studio. Yeah. So when you run basically Prisma Studio, let me open it here. And this, not this, localhost 5555, I guess. Yeah. So Prisma Studio, and you can see the model, right? And you can see the ID, the URL, the slug, the created and updated it, right? Also, I think this should be unique by default, but I think because I already added the @ID modifier, it will be fine, right? So you can see, and I can even add records from here and all that. But yeah, I mean, we'll just use this as like a database browser, right? Now let's actually write APIs which will actually create the URLs. So let's take the backend fun. So this is my approach. I always, like, if I'm working on a feature and it involves something related to backend, I firstly and foremost define the schema, because you need to understand the schema before you even implement something. It just forces you to think about every other use case, right? So the schema here, and now I'll be creating the endpoint, and then after everything I'll be creating the front end. So we have the URL route, and I created this post request, right? So now from the again, from body we'll get the URL. So URL from the body. And now the thing is, how are we going to create the slug? So either we can use this uh, method that is returned by cursor, which is just create a random string. But there is very high probability that it's not going to be random all the time, or there are going to be collisions between different slugs. We want it to be unique. So what I'm going to use is a package called NanoID. So NanoID, right? So I'm just going to go here. Right, and I think they even have yeah, so you can see, right? So they basically like tell you in order to have a 1% probability of at least one collision and all that. So let's say we want our characters to be 10 in length, right? So let's do that, 10. And let's say speed ID per hour second. So we are not going to be generating like thousands ID per uh sec per hour, right? So we'll maybe let's do 50, right? And even if we generate 50 ID per hour, right, we'll have 347 years needed in order to have 1% probability of at least one collision, right? So this is like randomizing, um, characters at like a different level. So I'm going to use this package. So let's install it. I'm going to go here, create another terminal, yarn, add NanoID. All right, so installed it, and let's import this. So you can see how we can import this. So I'm just gonna say import NanoID from NanoID, right? And then whenever I will call NanoID with the characters that I need, it is going to create the slug. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. So const slug is going to be a NanoID with 10 characters, right? Okay, and then const new URL equal to await, and now you can see I'm using Prisma, so that's why it is great to have Prisma. But first and foremost, we have to import it. So import Prisma. There is no lib Prisma from generated Prisma. All right, so we're running into issue. All right, let's ask cursor how to solve this, right? The error because import doesn't match generated. Looking at schema, the generic client is in the app slash generated Prisma, but you are trying to import from add generated Prisma. So you should say add app slash generated Prisma, and it will most probably fix it. Also, it is saying that, okay, so it says create a lib file that is, it's saying is recommended, and then import Prisma client from it and do all this stuff. And then actually just create the new Prisma client, because you don't have to create it all the time when you're making the request. I'm not going to do that right now. Maybe let's see if we needed to do that, but we don't need to do that right now. So Prisma client, and we'll just create a Prisma here. So Prisma, new Prisma client, right? So we created an instance of our Prisma client, which will allow us to, talk to the database. So now let's create our URL. So Prisma, and now you can see like I already have this URL property because Prisma actually created the type definitions for us. So URL dot create, right? Data, and what data should I provide? So URL, coming from the front end, and then the slug that I just generated, right? And you can see, and this will basically create the record in the database, and then I just have to send the response. So return next response.json, and I will just say the URL slug and message URL created successfully and everything. And also we can send a status, but let's not worry about that. Right. So basically what we are doing is we are taking the URL from the body, creating a slug for that URL, then just creating that in the database. And look how easy Prisma makes the insertion and everything, because I know I don't have to write like SQL or anything. It's just totally normal TypeScript or a JS library basically, right? So just make it very easy for us to do that. Now let's go to the all right, so this is done. Now let's actually hit this API and see if everything is working fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the route.http. So if you don't know, basically, I can just make HTTP hits from VS Code. I don't remember. I think you have to install like a extension for it. I don't really remember, but I have seen one of my colleagues do that, and from that time, I just always use .http file. So what basically you have to do is just define something like this, post like this, right? So you don't need the API because it is direct descendant of the app. So just like this, and you can see like there's a send request button, and there is going to be a body. So I just forgot like how used to do body. How can I make the HTTP request using HTTP file? So I don't really remember the syntax. So I'll just ask this. All right. So header will go something like this. Content type application JSON, and then you just pass in your body. So let's give the first URL, which is going to be my own blog, www.debuggingmylife.com, right? And see if this works, right? So I'm just going to send the request, and here's going to, so you can see the slug, the URL, and the message URL created successfully. Now let's go to our browser and see if that actually got created, and you can see the ID here, and then the URL, the slug created and updated, right? This is cool. So we were able to create a slug for our URL. Now we actually have to redirect to this service, right? Redirect to this URL using our service. So what I'm going to do is, you can see, so we're going to define a route for that. So I'm just going to create a new folder here. I'm just gonna call it U, and I'll tell you in a bit like why I'm calling it a U. And then I'm going to just get all the slug, right? So I'm just gonna do this. So new folder, slug, and then a new file, route dot ts, right? So basically what will happen is we'll go to this URL slash localhost, right? Slash localhost 3000 slash u and slash the basically the ID, right? Whatever ID we get, basically, for example, this ID. I'll just copy this and paste it here. And when I visit this URL, it will redirect me to debugging my live.com, right? So that is we are going to do. So for that, we are going to create a GET request because it is going to be used as a URL in the browser, not as a request. We are going to use a GET request, right? So let's define a GET request. So export async, right? Async function GET, right? And the request, right? So the request going to be next request, and then there are going to be params. Params have slug, right? All right, so that is great. Now we are going to extract the slug from the param. Then we are going to find the uh, uh, slug, not the slug, but the actual the URL record using slug. So from await prisma.url.find unique, and then we are going to say where slug equals to the slug, right? And we'll get the URL. And then if not URL, then we'll just return a error, which is URL not found, status 404. If we get the URL back, we are going to do this next response dot redirect URL dot URL, and the status will be 302. I'll explain why 302 and not 301, and even if like why not 301. So, but we have to import Prisma first. So I'm just gonna import the Prisma client and just create the Prisma here. And this will most probably work. So yeah, let's and also we don't need it, so I can just do this or not. It doesn't allow me to do that. Why? Something like this. Yeah, this is fine. All right, I think this will work. So what we are basically doing is we are reading the params, which is basically coming from the slug, which is basically slug. Then const URL, we are basically going to prisma.url, find the unique where slug equals to slug. And if we find it, if we don't find it, then URL not found. If we find it, then we're just going to redirect to that URL. Let's see if this works. All right, so this is the URL. What I'm going to do is localhost 3000 slash u slash this URL, and let's see if that works. And it works, right? So it basically redirected to debuggingmylife.com. So I want to do something. So for example, it's debuggingmylife.com. Let's change it to google.com. Save one change, and let's see if that works. So localhost 3000 slash c slash page could not be found. Yeah, because it's not C, it's U. And you can see google.com, right? So basically what our request do is, it goes to the Prisma, find the URL, and then, just redirect to that URL, right? And that is like pretty good. And I think we are mostly done with this because we have the URL, which lets you, because we have the endpoint, which lets you create the URL, create the shortened URL. And then we have the, the redirection endpoint as well. So now let's create the front end, right? And for front end, I would like to use cursor, right? And that will be Fun. Let's see. So we have this create next app. What I'm going to do is ask cursor to create the UI. So let's delete this and create a new chat, and let's cursor do it for us. So we are building an URL shortener. We are done with the backend. I just want you to create a front end for us to use. We can have everything on the main page. We just need a table with all the URLs and a add new button which will let us specify a URL to be shortened, and that's pretty much it. Right now, let's send this to cursor, and most probably it will be able to do that, right? So it's thinking about it. This is a Next.js project. It knows that we are using Prisma. So let's see if it is able to do that. So it's saying it understand backend and schema and front end, whatever. I'm going to like fast forward this part. So yeah, it created a to do. So one thing that it did is it actually made a change in the backend as well, which is it basically created a route which will allow us to allow the front end to fetch all the URLs, so it can show that in the front end, which is basic simple coastal await find everything order by this and just send it. Also it added like some error handling. So for example, what if URL is not there, so URL is required and so great. Now it's creating the front end. You look at this. So yeah. So it created the front end. In a front end, you have a table, add new URL form. It's tank excellent. Okay, so it says it is completed. Let's check it out if it actually is. This looks very bad, but you can see, right? I'm just gonna say like but it is using Tailwind, so I'm not sure why it looks so bad. Maybe restart the server and it will look better. Yeah. So sometimes like Tailwind is cached. It doesn't really update the UI even if you add classes, etc. Right? All right. So enter the URL to shorten and then click on shorten URL. Let's see if we'll be able to do that. I'll just open the console and see like network success, right? Uh, so I'm gonna go to debuggingmylife.com and actually just going to go here, paste it, shorten the URL. It sent a request and it got the back. And if I actually click on visit, you can see it works, right? Or if I click here, it works. What if we have a longer URL, right? So maybe go to like a longer URL. So let's say React JS, whatever. Um, and let's go here. So so we'll just copy this, paste it here, shorten the URL. You can see it's here. And if I click on visit, it redirects there. I can also just I can also just copy it and paste it here, and not this, but copy this URL and paste it. Copy, paste the localhost URL. One sec. Copy and paste is not working. So yeah, I think it will work now. Yeah, so you can see now it goes there. Let's use a different browser. It's not working really great. So let me open Safari and use this. And if I go there, and you can see, like, it redirects to this website. And if I use anything else like this one, and paste it here, it will go to debuggingmylife.com, right? So yeah, I mean, I think, and that's pretty much it. So this is like one of the live coding session that I wanted to do. We are running into something, but it's okay, everything is fine for us, so we don't have to really worry about this. So yeah, so this is like one of the live coding session that I wanted to do. And if you want more live coding sessions like this, just hit me on the comments. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. And I hope you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.